Hey guys, it's JAntonucci, and so for my final project, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be interviewing a couple people. I'm going to be asking them questions about their political beliefs, maybe how their upbringing has actually shaped their political beliefs and things like that. And so why don't we just get right to it? The 5 questions that I asked interviewees were: what's your name, age, where did you grow up? What's your current occupation? What sorts of political upbringings did you have? How would you say our current view of the government is today? And did you feel your upbringing has shaped your views, yes or no?
For question number 1, my name is JAntonucci. I'm in my 50s, and I grew up in Chicago and Miami Beach. For question number 2, I actually sort of grew up in the market after school, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I started out as a runner, worked the phones, worked the back office, and in 1979 I got my IMM seat. I traded on the floor when I started to have children. Then I was fortunate enough to transition from trading from home, which I still do today. I grew up in a very politically active family. My father was a Republican, my mother was a staunch Democrat, which led to a lot of lively discussions, and I think it sort of made me become an independent, made me think of both sides. In answer to question number 4, I really believe that our government is in a lot of trouble today, and not blaming one side or the other. I think they're both equally responsible. As you can see what's going on in the world, in our country, in our Congress and our Senate, it's in total disarray. There is no working together, there is no compromise. It seems like everyone is just totally hell-bent on staying with their own party instead of what is best for the country. Well, in answer to that question number 5, I do believe that my upbringing sort of shaped my political views. It made me think about each party and who was running, not as a Republican or a Democrat, but as a person, what they were offering to the government, to us, really not going with party lines. And I also think that that's how I raised my family, to be open, to view each candidate as an individual, not as a Republican or Democrat, to open the lines of discussion of what were their good qualities, what were they not offering for the country, for the state, etc. And I think that was my biggest gift to all of you.
We have Eric Nelson, who is 34. He grew up primarily in the city of Chicago and later moved to the northern suburbs. He's currently unemployed, but he has worked primarily in retail sales with a brief early stint in data entry, and most recently is working at a technical support helpline. For the third question, he said, my parents have always leaned more towards the Democratic Party versus the Republican, so this is more of a viewpoint that I was raised with, though I do not particularly identify with any major party. The fourth question, he goes on to say, for locally, he does not support the difficult separation, the notorious history of Chicago political governments, and basically goes on to say how there's been quite a bit of crime with ex-Governor Ryan and Blagojevich, and basically the questionable fundraising tactics and the incoming runner. Overall, nationally, he believes that our current POTUS wants to bring the change that we promised, but has been blocked at every turn by increasing partisan Congress and 2 powerful special interest groups and corporate lobbyists. He says, I think that both parties are broken with no viable situations available, and until some sort of real change is brought about, and to take power away from the lobbyists and SOGs and force the government to actually address concerns of its citizens. I don't know how or if this could actually happen, but until it does, I have little faith in the political process. For the 5th question, he goes on to answer his political beliefs were and were not affected by how he grew up. His family's always been in upper middle class, so he's been able to see how both the very rich and very poor have been affected by the past 30 years. Similarly, he has seen his own family positions deviate with the same middle class designation as the buying power of the dollar has fluctuated. And that being said, he said, despite my parents were always in the voting party lines, I do not identify as Democrat. So for our next interviewee, we have Gregory Antonucci, my father, who is 60 years old and he was born in Lockport, Illinois. He is currently a commodities trader and he's worked at the Board of Trade and was his first adult job, and he's worked there since 1975. He's done many jobs starting in 1962 at the age of 8. He started with a handyman business, which include cutting grass, lawn maintenance, garage cleaning, car detailing, and any other tasks required. He did this at the age of 14. His other major jobs were working with unloading trucks, driving trucks, bartender, waiter, cleaning stables, factory worker, pizza delivery, and worked at the Park District on their maintenance crew. He always worked 2 to 3 jobs at a time. For where he grew up in a very liberal household. His father was very involved in the Democratic Committee. And for number 4, he goes on to say, our government is very dysfunctional. We have completely lost the values and morals on which this great country was founded and built on. We are driven by special interest groups and money instead of what's best for the people. We have destroyed the work ethic of the people by creating a society that has lost accountability and would rather be given to work than work. I consider myself independent with conservative values. Number 5, he goes on to say, politically, I am the opposite of my parents' views as far as liberal versus conservative. His upbringing definitely shaped his political views. He goes on to say, I grew up in a lower middle class. I was self-sufficient at a very early age. I learned very early that hard work, respect, determination, strong values, and strong work ethic were necessary to get ahead in this world. I developed strong conservative values early in my life. I learned that in order to accept a paycheck from an employer, I must give 100% and not just show up and expect to be paid. I believe in our society is becoming one where there are more takers than givers, and they expect to work for the few and for the few to carry the masses.
So my name is Rebecca Weiss, and I am 23 years old, and I grew up in downtown Chicago. So I am currently a close to full-time employee at Rocket Fizz in the Glen Town Center. In the past, I have worked at Beck's Bookstore in the Glenbrook South High School, local high school, and I've also volunteered at the Coles Children's Museum as a children's mascot. I don't necessarily believe my upbringing per se influenced my views, especially because they evolved rather naturally. At least I don't remember a turning point where I kind of went one way or another. I just kind of always leaned Democratic for some reason, even though it didn't register in my mind at the time. I mean, you know, my mom's Democratic, my grandparents on her side are as well, and my dad's Republican, and I never really found myself agreeing with anything he happened to have to say about, you know, the government or how things should be run, or their taxes or what have you. So I just kind of found myself falling into that, you know, more leftist side of the ideology spectrum, and that really fit for me. I mean, I used to be more involved with politics when I was younger, at least in terms of, you know, maybe watching The Daily Show and wanting to learn more about current events, but now I just kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's really not worth, you know, getting too worked up over. You know, there's other things in life to focus on as well, even though it definitely determines the future of our country come election time. But, you know, beyond that, I try not to, you know, overexert myself in really examining these things too much. But yeah, that's about it. In terms of our current government, I have to say I was very supportive at first, and I really wanted to believe some really good things were on their way, and certainly some good things have definitely happened, and they've impacted my life thus far in a positive way. Unfortunately, there's just some kind of overreaching goals which I understand are more difficult to accomplish, which haven't exactly happened yet. No consensus has been reached, and you know, people are just infighting, and it's making the process a lot more longer and more drawn out than it really should be. So I'm not the most positive about our government right now. I kind of just take it with a grain of salt for the moment, especially since it's nearing the end of this term. But I'm, you know, hopeful for things to look up in the future at least. In terms of a political upbringing, I didn't necessarily have one, at least not formally. I just kind of grew up kind of assuming that my family was actually Democratic, although I suppose I shouldn't have assumed that because all my dad would watch is Fox News, and that is clearly a very Republican-leaning station. Although whenever I would watch it with him, that wouldn't necessarily click in my mind. And one day I just kind of asked him, "Oh, hey, Dad, you're Democrat, right? Like, it's the most obvious thing in the world." And he's like, "No, I'm definitely Republican." And that kind of made me realize there's two sides to pretty much the same coin. And I still consider myself a Democrat, but it's just kind of funny finally learning to make that distinction.